Right.
Pooja.
Hello, everybody. Hi. Good afternoon. It's so wonderful to be here with you this afternoon. Thank you so much for inviting me to share the practice with you. I hope there's lots of takeaway from this, and yeah, and I hope to be as I guess clear first of all about this practice and the way that I used the Huddlecraft Fund, but also about the intentionality behind why I wanted to work in this particular way, and then also leave some space for questions. So the way that this is going to be structured is I'm just going to share around 15 minutes of my practice and what we shared. I'm going to show some resources and some tools, which I'll share the link in the chat as well, so you can explore them independently, and then hopefully have some time for practice towards the end of this session, along with some time to answer questions. So yeah, introductions to me. First of all, my name is Pooja, pronouns she, they. I've worked in the creative industries for about 20 years, creating opportunities for different groups to participate in creativity, whether that's making work or creating a sense of community or using art as a tool for social change. So different with different communities who experience multiple forms of oppression or systemic inclusion. So kind of the principles of equality, diversity and inclusion have always been underpinning my work. And I've always been really interested in the creative industries being a generative place where we can really start to answer some of the broader political and social questions that we're all grappling with as society. Um, so I kind of been working in this way for like I said, around 20 years. And um, it was during the pandemic that I really started to notice that there were lots and lots of opportunities to kind of express yourself in the arts, but seldom were those opportunities catering for people with multiple intersecting personalities. And I wanted to understand why and what was going on. And I applied to the Arts Council for a pot of money to kind of create a space for women of colour. And that was to commission women of colour to make new work because I felt that the canon was missing intersectional stories and stories which kind of had the depth and complexity of lived experience from around the world. Um, and I was successful in that grant. And I did a really brilliant piece of work with three women. I made a film, and then it kind of got to the end of that project, and I was like, wow, what next? What do I want to do? And at the same time, I was simultaneously kind of, learning about imagination practice, and I was connecting with different communities through this work, and was really discovering as much as I could around imagination practice and how this could actually lend as a tool for us to think about, well, what kind of future do we want to create, and how do we imagine into that space, and how do I practice the kind of future that I want to create? And that's when I started to discover the Three Horizons framework. And I discovered the Three Horizons framework through um, a really brilliant initiative called International Futures Forum. I'm gonna just pop the link in the chat because it provides a range of different tools and resources for anybody who is trying to imagine the future slightly differently. So let me just put that in the chat. So I found this brilliant website with these brilliant practices, and was essentially quite obsessed with the way that this organization was starting to transform industries and practices. And it was through here that I found the Three Horizons framework, and I started to read um, Graham Lester's book, Transformative Innovation. Again, a really, really brilliant resource, using examples from real time, um, I guess, interventions in, institutions like the NHS, and big organizations that you think are sort of unchangeable or impenetrable, and change is, hard. And it's the oil tanker analogy, like this, there's this huge, massive oil tanker that we're trying to shift. So the International Future Forum found it's got several practices in there which you can just use for free, and they're brilliant, brilliant resources. So I came across the Three Horizons framework and was sort of, I guess, really like excited by this tool because I thought, wow, this allows us to think into the future really practically. Um, and I thought, what a brilliant way to start a conversation about what is possible. What a brilliant container to kind of look at where we are now and where we want to go and how we're going to get there. And so I applied for a Huddlecraft grant, and I got the grant, and I was like, right, now what am I going to do? I'm going to figure out how I'm going to make this thing come to life. And um, so the first thing was to really understand the Three Horizons framework, and kind of talk to people who had either used the practice before or talk to people who are really um, invested in that way of working. And Cassie Robinson brilliantly put me in touch with Graham Lester, and I started a conversation with him about how I can really sort of start to put this into practice. So I was kind of speaking to Graham Lester, learning from his expertise, learning from the International Futures Forum, and then really starting to kind of put into practice how this session was going to take shape. What I'm going to do is share the video, which kind of gives you an overview of the Three Horizons framework, because it was that video itself which really, really inspired me. And I think that it gives you a kind of a short snapshot of what it is, and how it works. So I'm going to share my screen in just a moment.
And share your sound as well, Pooja, so that we're listening to your computer sound.
Yeah, actually, you might need to give me a heads up on how to do that.
Okay, when you press share,
Mm-hmm.
and you go to...
Oh, I can see it. It's on the right-hand
Yeah, you
side,
click
share
on the right.
sound.
Yeah.
Introduction to the Three Horizons framework by Bill Sharp. It's a tool for thinking about transformation and how to bring it about. It doesn't give you answers, but like the staves on which music is written, it allows you to have a far more nuanced conversation, bringing out new insights and allowing people to disagree for more interesting reasons. In the context of transformation, there are always at least three qualities of the future visible in the present, three horizons in play, offering insights into possible alternative futures. In this framework, the y-axis is what's dominant, what's prevalent, and the x-axis tracks time. The chart is not a prediction, it is in good part an aspiration for the change we want to see happen and believe is one of the possible futures that can be achieved. H1 is business as usual, the dominant way of doing things today. We believe that there is something about it that means it's not fit for the future, and it contains the seeds of its own demise. Hence, over time, we believe that it will decline. For this example, I'm going to call it the degenerative and divisive economy that is predominant today, and that's pushing humanity out of the donut. H3 is the future we want, and the seeds of that future are present and visible today. We want to see them grow until they become the predominant way of doing things, essentially replacing and improving upon the old H1. I'm going to call it the regenerative and distributive economy that can bring humanity into the donut. The most interesting horizon is H2, the arena of disruptive innovation. Disruptions can take many forms. A new technology like the smartphone, an election or vote like Brexit, an earthquake or flood like Hurricane Katrina, a new concept like the Anthropocene, or a social movement like Occupy. Disruptions are likely to throw up innovations, new ways of doing or being, as different actors step in and innovate in the dynamic space of change between H1 and H3. The key question is how disruptive innovations will affect the transformation from H1 to H3. Take, for example, the disruptive innovation of digital platform technologies, which, with a phone in nearly every pocket, allow new kinds of real-time markets to be built upon distributed digital networks. When such a disruptive technology is paired up with H1 finance and business models, you'll most likely get something like Uber, which has become infamous for its divisive use of outsourcing on exploitative contract terms. This is known as H2- innovation because it is innovation that has been captured by the old dominant structures in order to extend the life of the H1 economy. And since the innovation is captured here by H1, its energy is not being channeled into helping the new H3 economy to emerge, and so it doesn't. Now consider the very same digital platform technology, but this time paired up with a business model and finance to create an app that is owned by the taxi drivers themselves. This is what happened in Austin, Texas, and the app is Ride Austin. Same technology, but designed and financed to help bring through a new model of enterprise ownership that has far more distributive outcomes. This is known as H2+. Disruptive innovation that's been harnessed to bring through the emerging future, and so it helps to hasten the decline of H1. So, pulling back, in any context of transformation, there are three overriding questions that can always be asked. What is being born, and how can we help it to arrive well? What is dying, and how can we help it to let go and leave well? And what is being disruptive, and how can it be harnessed, H2+, not captured, H2-. That's the framework in summary. I think it can also be used as a tool for a deeper dive in a group strategy workshop. Draw it up large scale on the wall and invite participants to discuss in groups and then put post-it notes on the different spots in answer to questions such as these. A. What is business as usual? The key characteristics of the prevailing system. B. Look back. How did we get here? What values, cultures, laws, events led to this? C. Why do we believe it's not fit for purpose and is failing? Give examples. And how fast do we want to see it decline? Because collapse is rarely beneficial. D. Is there anything valuable about the old system that we would want to retain rather than lose, such as its infrastructure? E. What is the future we want to bring about? Its key characteristics. What would it look like and feel like to be there? F. What are seeds of that future visible in the present? Give specific examples. And looking back, G. Whose work are these present possibilities built upon? What history, values, and culture are embedded within them? H. How could they be scaled and spread? Give examples of actors who are already working on this. I. What are competing visions of the future that are being pursued by others? Could we collaborate with them because we share enough core elements? Or are theirs inherently competing visions? If so, how do we prevent their vision from derailing ours? J. What is being disruptive? Think of many different kinds of factors: technological, political, cultural, ecological, economic, social disruptions. What are the roots of those disruptions? And for each one identified, what would it look like for it to be captured, H2- or harnessed, H2+? What can be done strategically to ensure that it is harnessed? Give examples of disruptions that you believe have been captured and others that have been harnessed. In each case, why did it happen? What made that possible? And lastly, my favorite, L. If you are a disruptive actor, whether a social movement, a tech innovator, or a new form of finance, what kind of guidance can you set for yourself to help influence whether your disruption is captured to extend the life of H1 or harnessed to bring about H3? What allies will you seek? What action will you take? How will you assess potential offers for collaboration or finance? And how will you work with others to ensure that the H2+ disruption scales and spreads? So there's an overview of the Three Horizons framework. Try it out and see what other questions it prompts for you. And if you want to read more about it, I really recommend Graham Lester's book, Transformative Innovation, which is based upon these ideas, and indeed the website created by Three Horizons itself.
System, it's just a simple task, meeting, deadline, email, to do.
Thank you,
Awesome.
Pooja. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Could you give a link to the video in the chat for folks?
Of course, yeah. Was everybody able to hear that okay? Amazing. So the section at the end where the narrator explicitly talks about each of the different post-it notes using the kind of alphabet, that was very much my starting point. But we didn't have enough time in this particular huddle practice to kind of explore all of those questions. So we just focused on the primary headline questions, sort of looking at H1, the kind of horizon 1, where are we now? Looking at horizon 2, like what's possible, where are we seeing emerging strategies for change? And then horizon 3, what's really disruptive and which is signaling the kind of future we want to be a part of. And central to this was the question that I wanted to ask, which was, how can the creative industries be a more supportive place for women of colour? That's my primary question. So I want you to just to think about that for yourselves. If you were to implement this kind of framework, what question are you grappling with? And how could the framework support you in exploring the question that you're grappling with? So just hold on to that for just a moment. I'll repeat the question in just a while. But so now what I'm going to do, that's a kind of background and some context to the Three Horizons framework and the question that I wanted to ask. And I'm just going to give you a short snapshot of kind of how I put this into practice and what my thinking was. Primarily, I was really interested in bringing a group of women of colour together because I thought, well, we are going to be best positioned to answer the questions, what our experience of the creative industries is now, and specifically in the UK. And also drawing from our personal lived experiences, understanding the systemic barriers, but also the ways in which we've experienced opportunities, where we've seen radical practices, where we felt we belonged, where we felt cared about, where we felt supportive. And it's important to kind of maybe acknowledge that central to this idea is that H1, the first horizon of the creative industries, particularly here in the UK, felt as if, well, with the women that I'd been working with anyway, was that the creative industries has kind of become degenerative in some ways. It's a thriving kind of industry in the UK, but it's kind of leading to this kind of commercialization and product-based value. And we need to interrogate that, I think. And so it was really important for me to bring women into the space who were experiencing the challenges and the barriers of really operating successfully within this sort of sector. So that's kind of like what I wanted to do, and the framework I wanted to use to kind of explore the big kind of meta question of like how the creative industries can be a more supportive place. But what was central to that is, how can I embody and practice the kind of space that I wanted to create? So the kind of future that I envision, or the kind of future that I think women of colour would thrive in, how can I embody that through this huddle practice? So what does the invitation look like? Who are the women I'm inviting into this space? How is the space curated? What's the session plan look like? How do I make something that feels generative and spacious and welcoming? So all of those questions I was really thinking about when designing this work and inviting women into this space. And what was really central to this was kind of creating a vision board. And so I started off with like, well, what do I want this space to look and feel like? So I created a vision board and just kind of collated some images. And this sort of just, let's make that larger. This kind of, what I tried to find were images across the internet where women of colour were together. They looked like they were talking and discussing and sharing with each other. They were laughing. There was love and generosity in the room. There was listening and space for reflection and sharing, as well as just sort of acknowledging that there's a variety of lived experiences with women of color, and wanting the space that I was creating to sort of emulate that, I suppose. So this vision board I kind of printed out and had on my wall, and was just kind of kept looking through these images and kind of sensing and feeling into the kind of space that I wanted to create, which was really, really important for me. The next piece of the puzzle was to think about the invitation. How can I make sure that the women I invite into this space, some of whom I knew and some of whom I didn't know, some of whom were recommended by the kind of community of women that I was involved with. And central to that really was kind of this quote that I'd got from Arundhati Roy, which was really kind of, for me, the call to action. It was sort of like, not only do we know another world is possible, but when it's really quiet, I can hear her breathing. And for me, that really kind of emulated the kind of spirit with which I wanted to open this space with. So the invitation was really kind of central to that. And I do have it somewhere. I'm just going to find it so you can see. Let me look. Here we go. So this is the invitation. Not only is another world possible, she is on her way. And on a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. That was the kind of central invitation, the call to action. So an invitation to an afternoon of hopeful conversation. Through a series of exercise, we'll explore what we already know about the creative industries, our experiences of working within it, and what an ideal future looks and feels like. Together, we'll engage in discussions which draw from our wisdom. Our aim is to create a supportive space where our ideas, experiences, and aspirations are shared. A space where we can learn from one another, and most importantly, be in community with one another. I made sure that refreshments were available, and all of the women were paid for their time and for their expertise. And that's primarily how I used the funding. So that was a sort of framing around the invitation. And then the final part of that was kind of creating a lesson plan that had lots of space within it. So I did sort of create a really rigorous planning process. And what I discovered through that planning process is actually that I need a co-facilitator to hold space with me. That actually one of the challenges that we're facing is that there's often one person at the top of organization calling all of the shots. And actually, what does it mean to do that in partnership? What does it mean to lead a session in collaboration with somebody else who can hold conversation alongside me? So I brought on a co-facilitator, and we designed a workshop together. I'm just going to bring that up for you so you can see it as well. Here it is. So this was the final. I can share this as well. Like it's on the blog, so I know it's very small at the moment, but I can share a link to it. But it was really kind of thinking about the introduction and how we'll be working with each other, what we'll be doing together, introductions to who we are and how we work, then kind of going straight into the kind of Three Horizons framework. Like, what do we really love about the creative industries? Why do we work here? And I wanted to give that question, and I wanted to open the conversation with that question because I wanted women to feel comfortable sharing from a place of love, joy, and excitement. I thought that would be a nice warm-up activity to get women talking about why they do what they do and what they love about the creative industries. Then we started to talk about using the kind of Three Horizons framework. What do we already know about the creative industries? So I asked, share your experiences of working in the sector. Themes might include access, belonging, pay, progression, opportunities, relationships, authenticity, publicity, and well-being. And so I asked the groups to kind of break off into smaller groups for discussions, because I thought, again, there might be more fluidity in conversations if we broke out into smaller groups to discuss that big question. And then we came back together as a group and shared back together. We shared the headlines, and this kind of gave me the post-it notes for H1, the horizon as it currently is, business as usual. Then we discussed the themes that kind of came up and anything that was shared. Then we moved into Horizon 2. So when, where, and how have we experienced good practice? What were the qualities? What did it look like? What did it feel like? And then I asked the group to kind of discuss as a whole group, and then to kind of write down any major headlines on post-it notes, which we then stuck on a big flip chart paper. And then we kind of started to kind of deep dive into some of these things. We started to notice, actually, this organization did this for me, or this individual helped me to feel more comfortable working in this specific space. We started to talk about practices and principles which we'd experienced in the creative sectors, which kind of highlighted or gave rise to the kind of future we wanted to be a part of. So that's given us our H2. It's this disruptive way of working, which is kind of different to business as usual. So when has somebody gone above and beyond? When has an organization made us feel really supported, really welcome, and felt like we could do our best work? Then we started to look at question 3. So how do these examples give us hope for the future? Like, what is possible? So we started to dream now, really dreaming big. Like, if money and time were no object, what does an industry or a sector look like where we can live our best lives, like where we can do our best work? So we set aside all of the things that we think we know about the creative industries, like, and started to think about what's possible, like what haven't we seen yet? What feels really good? How can we do our best work? And any examples of practice that kind of are leading the way. So we're starting to notice whether any organizations, individuals, or practices are starting to kind of demonstrate, are already there. They're the kind of behaviors, attitudes, and organizations that are kind of leading the way, and to sort of start to kind of feel into, well, what are the qualities of that kind of space. Then we shared back as a group, and then we just sort of talked about like what's come up today that's kind of made people feel heard, or that's kind of come up that people felt that they were holding on to and hadn't been able to share in a large group before. And this was a real, for me, the most magic, where the most magic happened, because what we realized through this conversation was that actually we seldom have a chance to talk to each other about what we're experiencing in the creative industries. As women of color, we're often picked up one by one and asked to do our work, and then we're dropped, and we're often competing for the same opportunities with each other, because there's a revolving door of people of color. So it was really interesting to kind of sit in a group like this and kind of share what our experiences had been. And then we had food together, and it was really important that we did this together, because one of the kind of cultural practices or principles of of being people is eating together, and that's kind of shared universally across a range of different people. So eating together was fundamental to this work. And it was Ramadan that day as well. So I waited until it was time for iftar. And so everybody broke their fast together. So women who were practicing Ramadan felt comfortable in that space. And it felt like their lived experiences were being acknowledged and shared by everyone, which was really lovely. And then we finish with gratitude. So just anything that's been said that day that has really resonated with somebody, or what's really kind of stood out to you from the day. and what they really loved taking part in. And it was a really nice moment of like togetherness, and everyone, it was really lovely and joyful, and everybody was smiling. And yeah, it was really, really, really beautiful, beautiful moment at the end. By the way, I keep looking over here because my second screen is over here. The last thing I kind of want to share um, is the picture of us all together. And this is a picture that we took at the end of the day, um, which is really cute because everybody was just really grateful to be there. And we'd really sort of like built this wonderful relationship with each other. Ooh. Here we all are. There's a group of women who came to this practice and who fed into all of our questions. And it was really wonderful because it was intergenerational. There were women who had been artistic directors of really notable organizations who had since retired, all the way to like young emerging creatives who were just starting out in the industry, and everybody in between. So it was intergenerational, lots of different lived experiences, as well as like disabilities and neurodiversities. So what I was able to kind of bring into the space was real diversity of lived experiences, which is, essential to the practice. Okay, so that's a kind of summary of what we did. And I would love for you to now think about how might you use this framework to answer a question or speak into a question that you're thinking about at the moment that relates to your practice. So my question was around the creative industries and how it could be a more generative, inclusive place for women of colour. So yeah, Hannah's put this brilliantly in the chat. Is there a question that you're working with at the moment, which the Three Horizons framework might be able to support you with? I want you to think about that for a moment by yourselves. And then we're going to go into breakout rooms for about 5-10 minutes, and just to kind of share with each other how might you use this framework, what's emerging for you. And then we'll come back as a group, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Handing over to Hannah.
Thank you, Pooja. That's lovely. So yeah, just thinking, is there a question that you're working with, a subject area, a bit of work where this insight into how change, or this framework about how change can happen towards a regenerative future might be useful? I'll give a couple more examples in case it's helpful from my own work. I use the Three Horizons framework on a long-term project I'm doing on aging and our attitudes towards aging and our experience of aging, how we imagine aging to be. And then another one is I just recently did some wonderful work in Wales in the slate mining valleys and working with young people, and they were reimagining what would their valleys look like that were places that they would want to stay in. What would it have to look like to be a place they would want to stay in? So many young people leave these valleys. So just a couple of examples. I'm going to put you into breakout rooms in a few moments. I'm putting you in groups of 4 to 5. However many people show up, just talk to them. It might be 4, it might be 5, it might be 2. I'm going to try and make sure no one's in a 1. Pooja, a sense of how long people have to have a little chat about their topic?
I think about 10 minutes.
About 10 minutes, okay.
Let's have a look. What time are we?
We've got 20 minutes left.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to leave some room for questions at the end. So maybe come back at 10 to, and then we've got 10 minutes for questions.
Great. Off you go. Have a little chit chat. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. I hope you had some juicy conversations. Pooja, over to you for a bit of Q&A, and would be It's never enough time. It's never enough time, Jill, in the
Never
break.
enough time.
Never enough time.
I can see there's some questions that have come up in the chat, but I've not captured them all, not had a chance to see them all. So please do just pop your hands up and let me know if there's anything that I can answer. But also with the caveat that I am not an expert, and I think that that's brilliant. I think we're all the experts, and I think that we need to lean on that a little bit more. So yeah, any questions or thoughts or reflections? What's coming up?
I have a question. I'm wondering, I'm new to this framework, so thank you so much for lifting it up to me. And in my small group, there was a lot of experience with it. Um, I am curious about, of the three horizons that you discuss, which one, maybe in one experience, has felt the most challenging to facilitate? I am wondering in particular that idea of identifying the third one, the disruptor one, might be challenging to get people to really think about what might be, especially in the United States right now. It all feels like there's no disrupting this narrative that's happening right now, this horizon, the reality horizon, quote unquote. So just wondering about if anyone has felt more challenging, if you have any thoughts on disruption.
That's a really great question because you're right. I think with people's who've experienced extreme oppression, historical, systemic oppression, exclusion, that those lived experiences are in our DNA. So the ability to imagine a new possibility, the ability to imagine what is radically possible is so far from our lived experience that it can be really, really hard to even think into that space. So I think that's why this framework really helps because you get to look at H2. What are examples of practice that are giving us some signals of the kind of change we want to see? So it's a kind of mini stepping stone. It allows us to kind of go to the next step before having to go to the stars, right? And so I think that it can be really, really hard to dream into H3. But and that is absolutely a part of our like lived experiences. But curating a space where open conversation, open dialogue is possible through a small stepping stone, I think can help us get there. But we always think in our minds, whether we like it or not, through dominator culture and through systemic oppression, because that's all we've ever known. But I think that that's why this framework's really useful because it provides us a stepping stone. I hope that answers your question.
Hi, thanks so much. I think we can just pop in and ask questions, right? Okay, good. No, I was curious, you chose to have sort of a more homogenous group of women of color in the arts community. And I was wondering why that choice of why I'm thinking, is it better to have a homogenous group or is it better to have groups that could be potentially contentious in the same room together to discuss these topics?
I think it depends on your question. So for me, my question was, how can the creative industries be more inclusive of women of color, of women from the global diaspora? So homogenous is a difficult word to use to describe this group because we had people from all around the world. We had all ages, and we had people with disabilities, neurodivergences, working class, people who were mothers and parents. So we had such a extensive lived experience that those contentions were absolutely present in the room. So people who had experienced growing up and accessing the creative industries in the 70s or the 80s had very different views to what the creative industries are now versus the people who are emerging, like people who have been trying to get creative careers or established themselves in the creative industries in the past 10, 15 years. So there was already that contention. And I think with any group, how homogenous or not homogenous it will be, there will always be those contentions. But I also think that that's what's needed. You need those contentions to have a really critical dialogue with each other. Because everyone has a different opinion and everyone has a different perspective and everybody comes from a different place. And so, yeah, I think that those contentions are absolutely vital to building a kind of future we want to be a part of.
Thanks. Yeah, I guess my question was poorly phrased. I was looking at sort of how do you decide how to define a group?
What do you mean?
Who to invite and who not to invite in your future, in your imagining futures? Like, did you set an age or like a geography, or just keep it open?
Keep it open. Keep it really open. Yeah, I think so. I hope that answers your question, Karen.
It does, except for then you're going to end up with a lot of people.
You have to find a way to keep it contained. For me, it was like women of the global majority who I knew worked in the creative industries in the UK. That was the container. And whoever was free on that day, that's the other limiting factor. Mark Langdon, I'm going to move on to you. I can see you've had your hand up.
Thanks very much, Pooja. I'm lucky enough to know Graham Lester, and I've been very familiar with this model, and it has tremendous potential. And I wanted to come on just because I was on the IFF website recently, and I know they've got training coming up in various different things. So try and encourage people to go in and connect and go to St Andrews sometimes because it's a beautiful place. But for me, I put in a little Howard's Zinn quote there, which is about the current the future being a load of current presents, and to live now in the way we want to live is itself a marvelous victory. And for me, that speaks a lot to our times at the moment. So that kind of concept of what is in the future and how that it's a kind of linear process to get there is slightly lends us to think in that way, where of course we know that life in the world isn't linear, and it's organic, and we can get to different stages at different times. But no, thank you so much, because it's allowed me to rethink and go back and engage with that process again. So very much appreciate your presentation and the discussion in the group. Thanks.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you.
I think, Pooja, that might be it. I think we might have to say goodbye there. Folks, I will be sending out a recording of the video for any of you that would like to see it again. And I'll ask Pooja to give us any of the links to anything in that as well, to message out as well. And thank you so much, Pooja. It was a really sort of vibrant dive into the Three Horizons framework, and I'd just encourage anyone to have a go, like you did in your small groups. Like, have a think through, like try and work with it. It's incredibly helpful at structuring imagination practices. There will be news coming very soon from the community about the opportunities that we're going to have quite a few opportunities arising soon, including there'll be another round of the fund coming up, and some more micro roles we'll be advertising, and we'll tell you all about that when it's a bit more stuck down. But it's all coming down a chute in the next few weeks. So do check out your emails, as that's where we'll communicate to you all. And lovely to see you all, and have a lovely rest of your Monday.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.